Welcome to your inbox last night, the daily podcast that gives you all you need to know today in under 10 minutes, if it's at all possible. Today's February 6th. Wow, 2025. And we have a lot to cover, so let's jump right in. As we promised yesterday, we were planning to continue to shine a bright light on the story about the crisis at the U.S. Department of the Treasury, at least until it received large-scale media coverage. Well, 24 hours later, that day has finally come. Before we start our regular content, here's a look at the stories reporting on the payments crisis that were in our inbox last night. Let's start with what we now know. Treasury says access to payments systems is read-only, but sources within the department describe an increasing push for full access to payment systems and sensitive financial data. Politico reports that Musk ally Tom Kraus, who, by the way, has been granted a top-secret security clearance, is leading an operational efficiency assessment of Treasury's payment systems. CBS confirms that Musk's team now has access to the Bureau of Fiscal Service, the unit responsible for disbursing over $6 trillion annually in federal payments, including Social Security checks, federal salaries, and foreign debt payments. Reuters cites a letter to Senator Ron Wyden stating that this access is meant to maximize payment integrity. But if that's the case, why are career Treasury officials raising alarms about risks to financial stability? Meanwhile, protesters gathered outside Treasury on Tuesday night demanding answers, with signs reading, "Nobody elected Musk and Besant. You had one job, protect our money." And that brings us to the reporting that really matters, the work of Nate Tankus. Nate, who previously worked in the very office now being overtaken, has sources inside the building. He's been ahead of the major outlets on this story, and his latest post is a must-read. Here's what he uncovered. The Treasury Department's official statement is misleading, if not outright false. He breaks down exactly which systems in the Bureau of Fiscal Service are at risk and why they matter. And perhaps most damningly, the person at the center of Wired's reporting, Marcus, is the one actively interfering with these systems. He's completely absent from Treasury's statement. So where does this leave us? The official narrative is that everything is fine, and this is just about, quote, assessing operational efficiency, unquote. The facts? Treasury's payment infrastructure is being manipulated under the guise of efficiency while officials scramble to cover for it. We'll be tracking this closely, but for now, we've linked Nate Tankus' full post from your inbox last night, because if you want the real story, that's where you'll find it. By the time of this recording, he's probably got something out on today's news, which is being misheadlined, that the White House has agreed to restraints. What's happening is federal workers filed a lawsuit asking for a temporary injunction. That temporary injunction was granted. Now, the White House has what they're calling a proposed order. So that means they're giving the judge a chance to sign something that they think both sides will agree to. No one has signed it yet as of 9:06 a.m., but what they're proposing is preposterous. So I posted about that on my LinkedIn, but we'll move on. I mean, we aren't calling it a crisis for nothing. Now let's get started, as we always do, with our most popular industry news sources, starting with the Fed. Treasury has no higher obligation than managing the government's finances on behalf of the American people, and its payments are critical to the process, wrote Jonathan Bloom, a legislative affairs official at the Treasury Department. But the Fed isn't talking about this at all. The Fed wants you to know that it's ready for 20022, and that they've got tons of services you have your clients use. The International Bank of Settlements has a piece written by founding partner of a consultancy that provides funding and management expertise, but it makes the case for a robust fintech regulation protocol worldwide to, quote, set the stage for a future where innovation thrives, unquote. Glenn Brooks says that leading all-in-one payments platform Checkbook today announced a successful expansion of its global push-to-card feature powered by Visa. And in what might be my favorite story today, Glenn Brooks explains that 9 out of 10 Europeans take an average of 3 minutes to enter their address and payment details when shopping online. I mean, that's friction. For example, the article spells out the name of one 58 letters long town in Europe, the longest place name in the continent. And MasterCard is teaming up with the Welsh town and 6 other sesquipedalian, a way of saying long with too many letters, towns across the continent. And MasterCard wants to take the pain out of online shopping for these folks with Click to Pay. And that's a payment solution that does away with data entry once and for all, security and seamlessness in one click. Wonder if that's right off the Amazon patent. Digital Transactions has the story about NVIDIA's latest, quote, state of AI in financial services, unquote, report. NVIDIA found that 60% of more than 600 global financial services professionals say their organizations employed generative AI or were considering it for use in customer experience. In Digital Transactions, fine print, they say Javelin Strategy and Research today released its inaugural 2025 Instant Issuance Providers Scorecard, revealing that financial institutions leveraging instant issuance gain a significant edge over fintechs and non-bank users. Let's turn to the papers. United FinDeck, an industry-neutral digital transformation platform, has acquired Commercial Banking Applications, CBA. They're a Norway-based banking tech provider. CBA provides API-driven trade finance and payments technology. And this move was financed both by equity and by debt from existing investors, and that's why it's interesting. Those investors are BNP Paribas, Citi, Danske Bank, and Standard Chartered. So seems like it's a network-wide thing of European banking. Also in the papers, Simon Taylor, writer of the fantastic FinTech Brain Food, says traditional rails won't disappear, but they'll become utilities underneath a stablecoin layer. And Ukura, a provider of embedded finance and foreign exchange risk management solutions, has announced its expansion into the U.S. market. The company's offerings include multi-currency accounts, global payments, FX conversions, and currency risk management through hedging. Time for a dive, a payments dive. Senator Josh Hawley and Senator Bernie Sanders have locked arms to introduce legislation that would cap credit card interest rates at 10% over 5 years. Trump campaigned on capping credit card interest rates at around 10%, so they seem to be collaborating on something that they hope will reach a lot of folks where they need it in the pocketbook. But the American Bankers Association immediately denounced the Hawley-Sanders proposal for capping interest rates, calling it an attempt at government price controls. JP Morgan Chase called the legislation misguided. PayPal's earnings report was great this week, and this story tracks. Payments Dive says buy now, pay later apps Affirm and Afterpay saw drops of 4% and 22% respectively of downloads in the fourth quarter of last year, compared to the year before. And downloads of Cash App fell 15% year over year that quarter. And downloads of Venmo were down 13%. But the PayPal app, with user demand for it increasing, had a 15% year-over-year increase in the fourth quarter. A few sources have this story, but it's basically the same everywhere. You'll remember a few weeks back we told you about a proposed interpretive rule accepting comments at the CFPB. Well, those comments are coming in, and it appears that gamers and their parents are in favor of the rule. The rule would require video game publishers to provide a mechanism for players to dispute payments and offer refunds to fraud victims by making the game platforms subject to Reg E. I haven't seen a word yet on comments about the stablecoins piece of that rule. That would also fall under it. Just keep in mind that the rule was proposed by Rohit Chopra when he was still at the FPB, which, as of this week, he no longer is. Banking Dive links to the New York Times story that the SEC is scaling back its crypto enforcement rules at the same time that the Wall Street Journal reports the SEC has let go of the top litigator who, quote, battled with crypto giants, unquote. Both of those stories are gated, and it will cost you to read them. Also in Banking Dive, it almost seemed to be bipartisan. The Senate Banking Committee agrees that debanking is a problem, and people should not be having that problem. But the two sides differ on who's causing the problems, the regulators or the lenders. Investments, partnerships, and appointments, things we don't cover here, are all to be found in the FinTech Times bi-weekly roundup. All right, crypto and Web3 news. Banking Dive is reporting that in a letter to the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, the Federal Reserve, and the FDIC, Coinbase renewed calls on federal banking regulators Tuesday to remove unlawful and unjustified impediments that limit banks' abilities to offer cryptocurrency custody and execution services. The Defiant has a pretty in-depth piece about the press conference crypto czar and podcast bestie David Sachs held to say that a stablecoin bill would be the first piece of crypto legislation going to Trump's desk and that a Bitcoin reserve is under investigation. The Defiant also reports that more than 2.3 billion of leveraged crypto positions were liquidated this Monday. That's the same day that the stock market tanked following the tariff tango. Several DeFi market participants note, though, that the lending program protocols were able to effectively process wholesale liquidations like that without incurring any bad debt, and that's a sign of the ecosystem's maturity. We'll see. Turning to our favorite substacks, This Week in FinTech is launching a new podcast on all things AI. Fintectress reports on 35 funding milestones across key industry sectors in the first month of 2025. FinTech Wrap-Up reports that legacy infrastructure and regulatory limitations remain roadblocks to widespread adoption of embedded finance solutions. And they review the top 9 companies comprising what they call the future of money mobility, with a nod to trends that are essential over the next few years. The payments engineer continues to be an invaluable resource, this week giving as much info as possible for you to be able to build your own version of Amazon QLDB, now that the company is removing that service and all of your data at the end of July. The only way you can get the data integrity of that Amazon QLDB is to build it yourself, because they promised certain integrity but didn't deliver it. And if you need to build it yourself, this one is a good one to have a look at. FinTech Blueprint has the history of the status of neobanks, and it's close to a masterclass. The piece reviews history, development, market size, product, funding, IPOs, ongoing challenges, regional differences, and interaction with other FinTech products. Well, that's about it for today's Your Inbox Last Night. Stay on top of things. Be happy. And we'll see you tomorrow.